This week on the Pennsylvania School Safety Hour, we're here in State College to continue our visit with Dr. Max Crowley, Director of the Edna Bennett Pierce Prevention Research Center. The center's researchers develop, implement, and evaluate interventions focused on promoting human flourishing in terms of mindfulness, compassion, and resilience in the service of supporting educational communities. And we will learn more about how wayfinding and tabletop training are critical to school safety this week on the Pennsylvania School Safety Hour. An important area of research focusing on child development and wellness is being done here at the Prevention Research Center. Program producer Eric Porterfield recently had the chance to sit down with Dr. Crowley and learn more about the work being done at the center. Work that contributes to better understanding what schools can do to become better informed regarding issues that can drive behaviors that can compromise students and staff's safety.
School safety is obviously related to children. How difficult does it make the work that you do evidence to parents, teachers, administrators with a marketplace that is $4 billion that has become much more predominant and prevalent as it relates to funds, what people think about in terms of school safety?
Well, I mean, I think, the burden of protecting children, keeping kids safe at school really falls to everyone, but no more so than the teachers and the administrators in schools. And we can't forget about that. We also have to realize the incredible pressures, right, that these schools have and the people in those schools have. In addition to keeping kids safe, they also have a mission to educate them. And for us, we've been very fortunate to have some long-term partnerships with schools and school districts around the country who have been part of studies, been part of service delivery, been part of the coalitions of preventionists that we've sought to build around the U.S. And so this is not an easy sort of task, right? People think that there are sort of magic solutions to keeping kids safe at school, but there's lots of ways that kids can be unsafe, right? And the process of actually securing a space, not only from a physical standpoint, but a psychological and emotional, so that kids can be successful in why they're there, to learn, to become educated, is complex. And it requires a systematic effort that brings together different stakeholder groups, not only the teachers and the principals, but members of the community, law enforcement, and faith leaders, nonprofits. They all have a role to play in how we as a community keep kids safe.
So how do you engage these communities? That's really the challenge in some ways, because I feel like in many ways they are afraid of making the wrong decision.
Yeah, I think that it's absolutely understandable that many communities almost feel paralysis or even a decision fatigue on what to do, right, in these situations. When we see the headlines, we see what happens, we see the risks that are in play, but the reality is that schools, where we have our children be, the spaces we make for them, are a reflection of our communities. And so many in the communities recognize that we have to take ownership of the spaces in which we're sending our kids and entrusting our kids. And so one of the things that for a long time the Prevention Center has worked in is this idea that we can actually bring together disparate folks from different areas, different sectors, right, together to try to solve these sticky problems of prevention. One of those is in the school context. We have incredible scientists here at the center who've been leading work in this area: Janet Welsh, Sarah Chalinsky, Joshua Gales. We also have what's known as EPIS, right, which is our evidence support system supported by the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency, that is providing technical assistance on how to bring together communities to be able to put in place evidence-based solutions to support schools, to support a variety of different things that happen in schools. And through their incredible work, right, they've touched pretty much every community in the Commonwealth, as well as their models and their approaches have been used in states around the country. And I think that that's something that that folks who aren't sort of deeply enmeshed in this may not understand, is that there's a science to how we not only keep kids safe in school, but how we build the community support and infrastructure that's needed to support those schools.
Governor Schweiker was the first person to provide the funding for what became, I believe, EPIS, right? And their office was in Harrisburg, right across the street from the Capitol. Dr. Greenberg said in an interview I saw with you guys. Policy is, that says to me, policy is clearly a part of what the work that needs to be done is.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. One of the things that we've learned over the quarter of a century here at the Prevention Center is that, yes, we need to intervene and support children and their families, right? We also have to support teachers and administrators in the schools. We also have to support other aspects of the community, right? The groups where children and families live. And this is all based on a scientific theory known as the ecological systems model, right? Not to get too technical, but there is a science recognizing that we're not just alone on an island, right? We're surrounded by our families, our communities, right? And the country that we live in, the world, right? And that there are lots of different levers that need to be considered. And one of those levers is local policymaking, right? State policymaking, federal policymaking. These play an important role in the lives of children and families. And so we here at the Prevention Center recognize that. And our community coalitions often involve local leaders, but increasingly we work with state leaders and even federal leaders to think about, how do we use the science to make better policy that is more effective, policy that uses public resources more efficiently? How do we put those resources towards kids at the right time and the right way to keep them safe?
So that involves economies too, and I know that that's an area of interest of yours as well. How does that play into that issue of policy and what we fund?
Yeah, definitely. I think that the reality is that, many of us feel like there is no amount of resources that we wouldn't want to spend to keep our own kids safe, right? Or to keep kids in general safe. But the reality is that there are not unlimited resources available. And there's also many things competing for those resources. And so one of the things that we've done at the Prevention Research Center, one of the things that my team, as well as my colleagues, such as Damon Jones here at the center, has thought a lot about is, so how do we make sure that prevention and programs that help kids and families are being considered with the same type of information, the same type of evidence, right? That, for instance, when the state's trying to make a decision to build a new bridge, right, or a new bypass, or or some other aspect of infrastructure, how do we show, right, from a fiscal standpoint, that investment in children and families actually not only leads to that kid being safer, that kid having a better life, but also how they're going to grow up and they're going to contribute to their community. They're going to become an employer themselves. They're going to be able to pay their taxes. They're not going to be reliant on different types of social services. How do we show the entire lifespan, right, the time course that a person lives in when you support them when they're young, right? And so that's something that's been really important and a real hallmark of the work here at the center for a while now.
Northern Pennsylvania Regional College offers a flexible, accessible, and affordable education across 10 counties and 24 locations. NPRC inspires and serves local residents and businesses through associate degrees and workforce training, making education affordable and attainable for students ready to invest in themselves. Learn more today about Northern Pennsylvania Regional College. Brighter futures begin here.
For 911 and emergency first responders, the difference between life and death is often a matter of time. 911, what's your emergency?
Please, hurry!
911 operators and emergency responders count time in seconds. For first responders, getting to the right address and precise location is greatly enhanced by ELS 911 Integrated Emergency Labeling System. ELS 911, as simple as ABC and 123. And for as little as $900 a year, your facility receives a professional wayfinding assessment, facility mapping update, 911 integration, and ELS 911 certification, demonstrating to stakeholders, insurers, and the public that you understand public safety is a matter of time. So don't wait.
Some of the study that you do and evidence-based work focuses on things like sports, nutrition, after-school activities. These are things that we're seeing have somewhat of a diminished role because of the funding. We're down big numbers in PIAA sports in Pennsylvania. These things are contributors, according to these folks.
That's right. These things are important, right? Where kids can go and not only be safe, which is really the baseline, but flourish, right? And build the skills they need to be successful when they grow up in the workforce, to be good parents themselves, right? To be civically engaged, be good members of their community, right? They learn these, right, through sport. They learn these through their extracurricular activities. They learn these in the classroom. And when those spaces aren't available, when those spaces aren't safe, right, then what we see is a loss, a lifelong deficit, right? And as we think about the next generation who's going to come along and help, steward and move forward our society, move forward our communities, take care of ourselves when we're older, right? We're really not doing ourselves any favors when we don't dedicate the time and effort and resources to making sure those safe spaces are available.
So the healthcare market, it began to sanction its own behaviors when it was basically taken over by corporate America insurers, large companies. What that did was it created formularies and efficiencies that hopefully fed safety as well. Are we looking at the same kind of model needing to be in place with school safety? Right now, the marketplace is unregulated. We don't have an FDA in school safety. So there's no way to check on whether there's evidence, let alone any real benefit to the tools.
Yeah, I think that the education space it's not a complete corollary to, for instance, the healthcare market. But I think you're right that we can learn some things, good and bad, right, from that space as we apply it, as we think about education moving forward. And there's one incredible resource known as the What Works Clearinghouse, which the Department of Education provides, which does provide a listing of what programs have evidence, right? And a variety of different types of programs for schools. And so schools can go and see that. We also at the center operate something that's known as the Results First Clearinghouse. This is a clearinghouse that brings in information from the federal What Works Clearinghouse for schools, but also a whole host of other lists and databases that helps make sense of, well, what programs do work, right? What are evidence-based solutions? So to that, right, the evidence is actually there, and right, there is availability. Where the sort of analogy breaks down is like there isn't the accountability around how we, in the same way, around using the things that works, right? And that's sort of, I think, one of the missed opportunities that a lot of schools are looking at closer. So how do we make sure that that schools are spending their limited resources, districts are spending their limited resources on things that work, right? And how do they make sure that they're meeting their student bodies, their communities where they are? And as we sort of see this information kind of become increasingly available, we do see this uptake. We don't have kind of the same sort of regulatory market. And I'm not necessarily advocating that's what we need. It's really important that local communities take ownership, as we were talking about before. They take ownership of these spaces where youth and families are, and they protect them, and they find ways to support and grow them. So local decision-making is incredibly important, but we need to make it easier so that these incredibly, honestly overburdened, right, teachers and school administrators and district officials have this information at their fingertips. And that's something that we at the Prevention Research Center try to do, right? We provide through EPIS and through the Evidence to Success model, through the Prosper model. These are all different models for building local coalitions to support schools and support community spaces, and providing what we refer to as technical assistance. Technical assistance is almost exactly what it sounds like, which is folks here at the Prevention Center, folks attached to EPIS and some of these other groups actually are on call to help communities not only think about how to select programs, but also how to find the resources to sustain them.
And if you could get more schools to engage, you have a larger data pool by which to assess as a school, as researchers, to determine how effective certain outcomes are based on certain populations. We're a very diverse state.
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing to remember, is that the Commonwealth is incredibly diverse, right? And even regionally, right, what schools look like in Pennsylvania are not what schools look like in New Jersey or New York or other areas. And it's not what things look like on the West Coast or in the middle of the country. And so the need, once again, for local communities to take ownership and believe that they have that local control is absolutely essential. But what we also need is the support structures, both here in the Commonwealth. We're really lucky to have things like EPIS that's supported through PCCD, but also across the country to have that infrastructure, prevention infrastructure, to support communities in schools and outside of schools be able to select, deliver, and sustain high-quality evidence-based services for youth and their children.
How did COVID complicate or bring greater attention to? They're two different things, but sometimes something bad can create something good.
Absolutely. I think that we cannot overstate the impact of the disruptions surrounding the COVID epidemic on the mental health of youth, right? It was incredibly disruptive, incredibly isolating for a lot of youth. And wherever they were in a developmental progression, whether they were young kids, middle schoolers, high schoolers, college age, right? All the way through adulthood, everyone felt this, but they felt it in different ways. And so sometimes kids who missed out on kindergarten didn't learn some of the essential skills, the social and the social skills, the emotional kind of regulatory skills that they need to be able to move forward, and they may still be struggling with it after all this time. Middle schoolers, high schoolers, missed major milestones, a major identity development that was needed, and we have to figure out how to support them, how to engage them in different ways. So you're totally right. It's shown a really not only important light on mental health for youth, but also exacerbated some of the problems that were already existing. But I think because it has shown a light on that, it has made people really take seriously how prevalent this is, right? How, there are many folks still in the country who didn't really understand that kids are not just, mini adults, right? They're developmentally very different, and their risk for trauma, the risk for different mental health problems is different, right, than they may have experienced. And how we talk about it, how we think about it, right, mental health has changed. And we're very fortunate, I think, that we're living in a moment where stigma around getting treatment, right, identifying and recognizing that people might have mental health needs is not as sort of intense the stigma as it once was. But at the same time, the problem is there's not enough resources to support the level of need we're experiencing right now.
Yeah, and I think out of that, it used to be suicide prevention was the term. Now terms like suicide ideation, which invites you to wonder what is that ideation, and I'm just simply putting it that way because I think this entire process that you're introducing through your work and your department's work and the chair's work is to get us to think about these things differently as well.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think that we understand a lot more about what mental health and well-being looks like in youth. And there was a time where, where the tragedy of a youth taking their own life was so overwhelming, right, for a community. And we used to do things like talk about and sort of the individual who took their life in ways that actually lifted up, right, this person. And we would have issues, for instance, of like copycat situations, right? And we know now not to do that in that way, that instead we need to be thinking upstream about the resources to help kids. And so you mentioned suicidal ideation, which is one of those risk factors that we often talk about, right? For not just suicide itself, but self-harm, right? Depression, anxiety, right? This is a major marker of a kid who might just need help, right? It's not a marker that there's something biologically wrong, right? That, they're never going to be able to live a normal life, right? It's something that maybe they're going through something, right? And that we, have the tools to support kids. And so it's very important, right? If you yourself are having concerns or thoughts around suicide, or someone that is, to help support them, either yourself or that person getting help. And there's a number of different resources for that.
How important is our bystanders, people that are there, excuse me, but aren't typically included in this process? The maintenance worker, the food services person, the SRO. These are people that are in many parts of a school during the day, but very rarely, in our limited view, do we see those people being included in the process that we're talking about.
Yeah, I think you're right. That I think that many people believe that as adults, we are responsible for kids, all kids, right? And if you work in a space where there are youth, we all bear responsibility in trying to be part of the solution. And I think that there are schools that are doing amazing jobs of engaging all of those individuals and recognizing that they play an important role as well, right? The maintenance worker that finds the note in the trash can, the SRO that makes himself available in the school. What we don't see is sort of that being systematic, right? And there are models and strategies to do that in a greater fashion. I think that this sort of idea, though, of we're not just waiting until the problem occurs, right? That we're looking upstream, right? And helping districts, helping administrators, helping schools be able to provide the resources to all of those frontline workers who are engaging with kids or might engage with kids to know the signs, right? Know the opportunities in which to engage. I also think that there's a really important aspect to how we conceptualize school safety, that the goal is not and should not just be about keeping kids safe. This is not, schools are not meant to be babysitters, right? What they're meant to do is educate and support and prepare youth for a good life, right? And so bringing in positivist frames, right, of not only how do we be on the lookout for the bad thing, but how do we be on the lookout for the opportunities to help kids flourish becomes incredibly important.
Yeah, and you talked about this earlier, there's been a study about recess, for example, and how that's your first experience of dealing with, as a 6-year-old, conflict resolution, right? And I know that in some of your work, you talk about the importance of resiliency and competency as a critical formative pathway.
the concept of social competencies, emotional competencies is incredibly important, right? Some of your listeners may remember kind of the signs of everything in the book. Everything I ever needed to know, I learned in kindergarten, right? And there's so much more truth to that than you might ever imagine, because those early skills around, like, how do I not throw a temper tantrum, right? How do I, like, make up from an argument with a friend, right? These are such fundamental skills. And when we miss out on learning those in early life, that follows us, right, through our entire life. It follows and it affects our happiness. It affects our ability to be connected to people. And one of the things that you had mentioned earlier is the role of, other people, bystanders and otherwise. And when kids are isolated, they're at risk, right? School safety is not just about kind of maintaining safety in the physical environment. It's about making sure that kids are connected, right? Which requires not only the community to be receptive and inclusive, but also for a kid to have the social and emotional skills that are needed to stay part of that web, stay part of that community. And so I think that for us, we've been able to have the privilege to follow youth from before, from 3, 4, 5 years of age, and follow those same youth longitudinally into adulthood as they start their own families. And what we see is that these skills, right, they don't only affect, like, if they're successful in 3rd grade, right? What they affect is, do they get a job after high school, or do they go on to college, right? Are they able to start a family and find a partner, right? Are they able to, function in society, or are they more likely to get arrested, right? We're talking about at age 6, we can detect effects on how a kid is learning those social emotional skills through their entire life. And it's incredible, right? And it speaks to not predestination, or that a kid who doesn't have those skills at 6 is doomed. I'm a parent. I would never want to hear something like that. And I know it's not true, but if nobody ever invests and supports and takes the time to help a kid learn those skills, then they are on bad paths. So,
And as schools need a plan in order to implement what you're talking about. And that plan needs to include, to some degree, what the physical environment does look like. And right now, the physical environment in a lot of schools is tending toward metal detectors and those types of things. How does that impact a child?
I think it's an important element in a discussion I think we're having societally, which is kids don't only need to be safe, they need to feel safe, right? And it's hard to learn if you don't feel safe, even if you actually are, right? And this is not to say that kids aren't resilient and that they can't bounce back when a bad thing happens, or that they shouldn't be able to bounce back when a thing happens. But if a kid goes to school every day and doesn't feel safe, right, it's really hard to succeed. And so, metal detectors may be totally appropriate if a kid understands why they're there and what they're doing, and that in reality, they're just a precaution. But then there's lots of other things, right, in the environment that signals you are safe, right? And so it's not that there's, one thing that you should or shouldn't do, right, in a school environment to keep them safe. Different communities need different things, right? But the goal should be not only to keep kids safe, but help make sure they're safe so they can learn.
The issue of inequality is a touchy one, I guess, but it's one that definitely plays into a lot of issues that affect the child's sense of safety, whether that's at home, nutrition, the family dynamic. Are parents, are they themselves healthy? Are they themselves using? Things like that. Those are somewhat out of the control of teachers and administrators. However, when it comes to some of these issues like nutrition, schools can play a role, and it seems that it's a very important one, not just from a physical, but from a cognitive and behavioral standpoint.
Yeah. Well, I think that this idea of safety, right, there's physical safety, there's, you mentioned nutrition, right, to the having adequate, healthy food, right, and access to that and actually eating it, right, and those are more absolute, right, but the idea of a kid feeling safe so they can learn is much more relative, actually, right? Kids can live in very impoverished settings, and they do all around the world. And if their peers are also in that environment, if their families are in that environment, they can, in fact, learn and thrive and succeed, right? They can flourish. But you brought up inequality. When a kid feels like they don't have the things their peers have, that can be really hard to understand, especially when you're really young. And we've probably all been at school and a friend or someone else had something that we didn't have, and we felt that jealousy. We felt that, that why don't I have that kind of question? And kids are still, their brains are still growing, they're still learning. That's a natural question, a natural thing to experience. We don't all need to be the same. But when it's, once again, systemic, every day a kid feels like they're not getting the opportunities that their friends and peers are, they're not having access, and so everyone has more than them, that sort of perception becomes really important, because it's not only really distracting, it's demoralizing, right? And after a time, it can actually lead to mental health issues, right? The feelings of anxiety or depression, because we know that when people don't feel like things are going to get better, when they lose hope, even kids, right? A lot of bad things happen when we start to for their mental health.
So do things that, it seems that a lot of things are very commonplace in this discussion that we have, and those are things like prevention methods that go straight to a reaction or a response to an incident, right? Are we driven by fear in the choices that we're making? Are some of these things mere panacea because they don't have any evidence to their utility, yet we are investing heavily in a lot of resources that are intended to keep our children safe?
Yeah, I think that where I would like, and I think many folks who are in the scientific community would like to see the conversation turn to, is that we need to keep kids safe from acute threat. Absolutely, right? That is for sure. But when we look at the lifespan of a kid, right, and kids are very resilient, and except when they experience hardship and threat and feelings of being left out, feelings of not having opportunity, day in and day out, right? And in many ways, a school that for a kid where they're isolated, where they don't feel safe, where they feel like they have less than all of their peers, right, is a much more dangerous place in terms of their lifetime. And I'm not talking about, of course, situations of school violence, right, or an active shooter situation. These are incredibly terrible tragedies, and we should be investing in ways to keep our kids safe. But part of that, right, is also often, right, about making sure that kids who might be socially isolated or might be struggling with mental health issues are not falling through the cracks and under the radar, right? Because we often do see, in many cases, that kids who end up engaging in those sort of extreme violent activities are those who do become very isolated. They aren't included. People aren't paying attention to them. And so it doesn't mean that the things that we're investing in now are the wrong things, but they're certainly not the only things.
So prevention, you mentioned it before, Ben Franklin, but prevention always is a more economic approach. And it tends to have a better outcome as well. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so I definitely can. I mean, I think that there's incredible work, right, that's out there demonstrating how, small investments in children and families at the right time can really change what we refer to as their trajectory, right? Their whole kind of path in life can change because, as we know, one adult cared and really took the time to support them. And if that one adult or that teacher or that school administrator is armed and supported with quality evidence-based strategies that we know support and address those risk and protective factors that we've talked about, then amazing things can happen. Right. What we want to be really thoughtful about is that those strategies, right, are also require time and effort, especially to do at scale. So yes, like the economics are certainly in the favor of get them early, right? Support them, don't let them fall through the cracks, right? And we can prevent some of these really bad outcomes for the kid, for the school, for the community, right? But it means concerted effort. And I think that's something that when we talk about the investment, we're a society who likes to take a pill, right? When we have a problem, we want to take a pill and we want to forget about it, right? Because we don't want to think about the bad thing that might happen. We don't want to think about our own mortality. We want to be able to address the thing and move forward. That's not how kids work, and that's not how the spaces that kids work are, operate. These are every day, right? The sort of, teacher who shows up, the principal who walks around the school, the folks that take the time to say, hey, let's put this curriculum in place because it'll help our kids kind of come along and understand, like, yeah, go talk to the kid who's playing by themselves on the playground, right? Talk to the girl, who seems to be having a hard day and spending a lot of time in the bathroom, right? Building a community, building a culture in schools can do a lot of the heavy lifting, but it takes a little bit of work every day as opposed to the big flashy kind of investment.
If I'm a teacher or if I'm a parent, how do I engage with the center or with other organizations to begin a process of planning versus asking you for a solution? I would imagine that's not what you want, but how would they begin to be a process that would include what you guys are working on?
Yeah, definitely. If you're a teacher or administrator, there are lots of ways that the Prevention Center at Penn State can help. Feel free to reach out to us, of course. We have a number of resources on our website that includes links and access to our Results First Clearinghouse, which provides an extensive list of different programs and solution and curricula that might be relevant or might be valuable for y'all. But we're also available for if folks want to reach out directly, we can certainly have the conversation. We have an incredible infrastructure supported by the Commonwealth to help provide support and technical assistance to communities, and we can get you connected through them. We have incredible scientists who are happy to come and talk with folks as well. And so we really view ourselves as not only a scientific enterprise, but a group that's looking for community partners. And maybe you have an idea as a school administrator, maybe you have an idea as a teacher around what your students need, and you want to know, does it work? And that's an area where we love to create partnerships, and we can help bring resources to bear with that as well. So please feel free to reach out.
Dr. Max Crowley, thank you so much for being on today.
Northern Pennsylvania Regional College offers a flexible, accessible, and affordable education across 10 counties and 24 locations. NPRC inspires and serves local residents and businesses through associate degrees and workforce training, making education affordable and attainable for students ready to invest in themselves. Learn more today about Northern Pennsylvania Regional College. Brighter futures begin here.
For 911 and emergency first responders, the difference between life and death is often a matter of time. 911, what's your emergency?
Please, hurry!
911 operators and emergency responders count time in seconds. For first responders, getting to the right address and precise location is greatly enhanced by ELS 911 Integrated Emergency Labeling System. ELS 911. as simple as ABC and 1, 2, 3. And for as little as $900 a year, your facility receives a professional wayfinding assessment, facility mapping update, 911 integration, and ELS 911 certification, demonstrating to stakeholders, insurers, and the public that you understand public safety is a matter of time. So don't wait.
We're here today with Tod Langley with CRLT. Welcome, Tod. It's great to have you.
Thank you, Susie. It's my pleasure.
Sure. So if you could start off by telling us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I'm from Indiana, born and raised there. Was an U.S. Army infantry soldier and officer. Pretty conventional assignments at that time, rifle platoon leader, company commander. My last conventional assignment, I was a senior trainer at the National Training Center, and that's when 9/11 happened. And like many at the time, I felt that I wanted to do something a little bit more involved at the staff than being staff. So I put in a packet with special operations and was picked up within our special mission unit community. And there was a singleton operator, a troop commander, battalion commander. Became a senior advisor after leaving service with another special mission unit. And then after that, moved into becoming in the intelligence community a high threat team leader, and then the senior cadre for selection training. Unfortunately, in all of that, it was about 11 and a half years of deployment and about 6.5 years of combat. So.
Wow. That's amazing. Thank you so much for your
Thank
service.
you. I appreciate it. I think the challenge of what I saw from that time period up until now, which included, I had an opportunity to be a consultant for Fortune 5s to Fortune 50s, a lot of state level emergency management and also tactical level training into what the company is doing now that I have. This is that if you look back at whenever we've had a catastrophic failure for something with an incident planning or response, there are typically 1 to 2 factors that are key that indicate if you don't do them well, there's going to be a problem. We call those the leader and staff friction points. I've seen them across the board from conventional forces to special operations to the best of the corporations to our local government, even down to the school level. And the problem is that I don't think we understand, we're finally starting to understand that there's a problem with the way we're doing it. But we don't understand how detailed we need to be in the focus of that. What that means to awareness, education, training, and the validation. We have to validate that on a yearly process. And I think we're just now finally opening up to that.
Wow. Yeah, it's amazing that it would all come down to just like the 1 or 2 points, as you said.
Yeah, there's actually 8 to 10.
Okay.
But what we'll see is that there's a cascading effect. So as an example, how well are we unified in our command or leadership that we're all oriented on the same objectives? Do we all have the same type of situational awareness? Are we able to communicate with each other effectively? Do we know how to integrate assets? But I've also got several use cases of it doesn't matter how many assets you particularly have. As an example, Uvalde, over 350 agents responded, but if they're not synchronized to do the right thing at the right time, that can be catastrophic. So there's a series of them, but typically when we see 1 or more of those combined together as a leadership problem, then it's going to have disastrous impacts.
So then, can you talk a little bit about CRLT and how that developed? I'm assuming it's based on what you found from your experience.
It was a passion project for sure. When I left with the intelligence community, Really want to understand what could we do as a give back more. And so we found a crisis response leader training, CRLT. We're headquartered out of Indiana. And essentially what we wanted to do is look at the broad spectrum of what we have and what I'll call the training paradigm. Typically we look at a training certification as giving you that foundational approach to what you need to do to be able to do your job in public safety or emergency management. The problem is with the learning and forgetting curve, all the studies show that if you don't readdress in a recurring manner for professional development, you're probably going to forget 70 to 90% of what you've been instructed upon. And imagine putting on top of that the stress of having to do it during a critical emergency situation. So we know there's a problem with that. We have to increase our revisiting of the information. But there's typically three things that prevent us from doing that. Time available to train on it, the amount of money it would cost, and whether or not we are siloed or in a vertical space of our training rather than being holistic. A lot of the problems we see right now fall in those three major categories. They're not being solved through your traditional training approaches. We're not saying quality instruction is bad. You certainly need that. But you have to figure out an alternative way of being able to address those issues in an economic and efficient capability. So the concept behind CRLT was to take video game technology and utilize the mechanics of what you'd have that kids, use for AAA video games and turn that into something for public safety. So imagine a strategic chess game that allows you to look at the consequences of your decisions, and all of the other artificial intelligence will react to your decisions and reflect what has happened in the real world from statistics and probabilities of outcomes and evidence from national level references. Now we put that in the hands of the organization to utilize as many times per year as they want, as many different users as they want. They can train on it for professional development at the individual level, and when they're ready on a quarterly or semi-annual basis, they can work with everybody else that would be involved in the problem, and they can share their concepts, ideas, and actually test it against their plan through the virtual environment and save a lot on the resources needed to actually conduct that training, and certainly not put anybody at risk, to include psychological trauma, because all of it can be conducted virtually.
Wow, it sounds like an amazing tool.
We think so.
Right?
Yeah, we do.
And something that could really benefit just like the broad community. And it sounds like it's delivered in a fun way through gaming technology. That sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, so one thing that we're very proud of is we have one of the largest abilities to reproduce in the three-dimensional environment artificial intelligence that's independent. A lot of people talk of cloning and all of this. All of our AI is completely separate in their perception trees from each other. So that gives you variation, but also making it very realistic. On top of that, we're the first to come out with Amazon AWS, the ability to do this fully remote. Whether it's a single participant, multiple participants, including voice channel communication and dispatch, and put all that in with the capability of creating a custom environment that is one of your own facilities. So we're very proud of the tech capabilities that we've put together that have not been introduced into the public safety space yet.
Yeah, wow, that sounds amazing. Well, Todd, thank you so much for sharing with us today. We appreciate it, and we look forward to hearing more from you in future episodes.
Yeah, thank you. We're very excited. Thanks for having us on, Susie.
Using CRLT's The Incident offers several significant benefits, enhancing your preparedness and response capabilities. Here are 5 key benefits. Realistic scenario simulation. The Incident provides a highly realistic immersive simulation environment that mirrors real-world emergency scenarios. This allows participants to experience and respond to complex incidents, such as active shooter events, natural disasters, or hazardous materials spills, in a controlled yet realistic setting. The high fidelity of the simulation helps in understanding the practical challenges and decision-making processes required during actual emergencies. Enhanced decision-making skills. The platform is designed to challenge participants with dynamic scenarios that require critical thinking and rapid decision-making. It helps leaders and responders practice making strategic decisions under pressure, which is crucial for effective incident management. By simulating various response actions and their outcomes, participants can develop and refine their decision-making skills, improving their readiness for real emergencies. Interagency coordination and collaboration. Emergency responses often involve multiple agencies and departments in support of an incident response plan. The incident facilitates interagency coordination by allowing different stakeholders such as emergency managers, first responders, facility managers, and city officials to collaborate within the simulation. This fosters communication, builds trust, and ensures a more unified and coordinated response during real incidents. After-action review and continuous improvement. The platform provides detailed performance metrics and analytics post-simulation, enabling thorough after-action reviews. Participants can assess their performance, identify strengths and weaknesses, and pinpoint areas for improvement. This continuous feedback loop is essential for refining emergency response plans, training protocols, and resource allocation, ultimately enhancing overall preparedness. Cost-effective and scalable training solution. Conducting full-scale live exercises can be logistically challenging, expensive, and disruptive. The incident offers a cost-effective alternative by providing a virtual training environment that can be accessed remotely or in person. The platform's scalability allows it to accommodate a range of training needs, from small facility-specific exercises to large city-wide drills, making it an adaptable and practical solution for varying organizational requirements. Want to know more about CRLT's The Incident? Contact a Safeware representative for more information. We are ready to help you with your awareness, education, and training challenges.
And hello, Susie. I'm here in State College at MCM Consulting Group's offices. And today's question is, should schools have school resource officers? Susie, back to you, and see you in a few weeks.
For myself and Michael, thanks so much for watching. Join us again in 2 weeks, right here for the Pennsylvania School Safety Hour on PCN.